Breaking freaking news. You thought this was just, oh, sorry about that. It's so insane. I'm drooling right now. You thought this was going to be a normal day, day where you watch some college football on a Thursday night, Penn State playing today. But instead, what's going to happen right now is something completely shocking that we did not anticipate after the firing of Antonio Pierce for the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, general manager Tom Telesco has been fired by the Las Vegas Raiders. And the reason why this came as a surprise is because the Antonio Pierce decision happened. We had about a day and a half delay, about 2 days until this decision was made. And it seemed like because the Raiders just hired Tom Telesco as their general manager last year and had a pretty decent draft, maybe they would have some continuity and go with him into next season. There's some big updates we're going to talk about in addition to this general manager firing, because what this general manager firing means is something a lot more substantial. We're going to talk about the coaching interviews, the head coach interviews that the Raiders have set up right now. And apparently now we're going to have to deal with the Raiders figuring out who they're going to have as their new GM. And so anticipate some new general manager interviews happening. But based on the information I'm about to tell you right now, stuff that I'm looking at, I don't think a general manager search is going to be that tough for the Raiders. It's looking like, based on what I'm seeing here, it's looking like the Raiders, if I had to guess, just like anybody else, it looks like they have a big candidate in mind to be their head coach, and that is why they made this decision. You don't fire your general manager, especially after they had a decent draft. You don't fire them like this unless you know you have some guy who you believe will take this job and who also would like to have their own general manager. And I believe that is why the Raiders made this move. You only do something like this if you got something up your sleeve. So this is in some ways good news for Raiders fans, in my opinion, because we're gonna break down what this means in terms of Ben Johnson, Todd Monken, who the Raiders are interviewing, Robert Saleh, who the Raiders are also interviewing. This is good news because let me just say, let's go into the details first, and then I'll start giving my opinion on it. You already have speculation from Pro Football Talk, NBC, about the firing of Tom Telesco, saying this firing will make it easier to make a play for Bill Belichick. We'll talk about the Bill Belichick rumors as well that have been lurking in the background. Shout out to Do Right.
Do Right, $4.99. First off, shout out to the homie for making more
appreciate you, Do Right.
Love to see it.
Hell freaking yeah. Appreciate you, man. Appreciate the love. And we do, because news is happening like this, insane news, we got to get to it quick. And that is why we're doing more of these live streams. And appreciate you, Do Right, and hope you guys enjoy this. Hit the like if you have not yet. So Diana Russini, one of the head top dogs at The Athletic, one of the top publications for NFL sports, what she said is, from what I was told, Telesco was fired mostly because ownership seemed to prefer having the general manager and head coach more connected, like a cohesive partnership, rather than something that feels more arranged or forced. Brady has a lot of influence in Las Vegas. So it's going to be tough because the Raiders are already in a tough position to attract some of these top candidates. It's going to make it even tougher if you're telling somebody, not only do you have to work with Tom Brady, not only do you have to work with Mark Davis, who, let's be fair to Mark Davis, is pretty hands-off. So not only do you have to work with Tom Brady, but you also have to work with general manager Tom Telesco. That's going to be a tough sell to a lot of people.
Who's going to fire Mark
Shout out to
Davis?
Reverend Malik, who's going to fire Mark Davis, though. Look, Mark Davis is putting it all on Brady. Mark Davis is, and you see this by Diana Russini here. Brady has a lot of influence in Vegas. Mark Davis is basically setting himself up to say, hey, if this shit does not work out, blame Brady. Don't blame me. Brady is the one making these moves. I'm giving Brady control of the car. If this thing wrecks, go hit up his insurance for to repair the damages because he's the one driving the car. But you're already in a tough position because you don't have the top pick of the draft. You don't have a franchise quarterback like the Bears, like the Patriots with Drake May. Now you're trying to say, oh, you got to work with general manager Tom Telesco. Firing him made sense in this moment. Jordan Schultz who's often on Fox Sports. By firing Tom Telesco and Antonio Pierce, the Raiders can now sell to top coaching candidates that they will be getting a clean reset at both levels of the organization. That's something that most of the other offerings cannot offer. Let's talk about the Bears. Let's talk about the New England Patriots. The New England Patriots and the Bears are, I think, the two destinations that you rank above the Raiders right now because of the quarterback situation, because of the resources they have for the Bears, at least on the defensive side of the football. But one issue the Bears have is they have general manager Ryan Poles. If you're a head coach, you got to deal with Ryan Poles. And for the Patriots, you still got to deal with the Kraft family, who is heavily involved in decision making. So that's going to be an impediment to a lot of people who want full power, full control of an organization. And who could the Raiders be given the keys to? So we know general manager Tom Telesco is officially fired. And it's tough for him. He had a good run with the Chargers. I think he had a decent run, Tom Telesco, with the Raiders. You got Brock Bowers. You got DJ Glaze in the third round. You landed on Jackson Powers Johnson in the second round. And you found some contributors in the secondary in the later parts of the draft. So I do think this dude is not done. I do believe this dude will get a role somewhere. He's solid, but ultimately, if you're cleaning house and you want to get the big candidates, you're going to have to let him have all the resources, all the control they can possibly want. I appreciate you, Joel, for subscribing. So the Raiders requested to interview Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator of the Detroit Lions, and they also requested to interview Aaron Glenn, the defensive coordinator of the Detroit Lions, who did previously work with the Saints organization. These are obviously some of the hottest candidates because when you're working with one of the biggest teams, one of the most successful teams right now, the Detroit Lions, this is what happens. Their coordinators get plucked. They get plucked by other teams. Now, this is pretty good for the Detroit Lions if Aaron Glenn gets hired because they get a third-round pick. I think it's according to the Rooney Rule if a minority coach is hired as a head coach. So that's an interesting little fact there. But what I will say is I find the timing of this Tom Telesco firing interesting because we know the Raiders are going to interview Ben Johnson. When are they going to interview Ben Johnson? Anybody want to take a guess? Well, the answer is right here, Friday today. So the Raiders are interviewing Ben Johnson today. I don't know what time. I don't know what time, Pacific time, Eastern time, Central time, Mountain time. I have no idea what time they're going to interview Ben Johnson. But the Raiders and the Patriots are interviewing Ben Johnson today. I don't know, who's going first, but this is what it seems like the Raiders did. Friday's tomorrow. Friday's tomorrow. Okay, so I'm losing my mind so much in this coaching cycle that I forgot that Friday's tomorrow. All right, we got that established. That Friday's tomorrow, not today. Thank you for the chat for roasting my ass. Go ahead and laugh at my ass right now. Dude, it is just flowing in the track. It's Thursday, bro. It's Thursday, bro. It's Thursday, bro. Okay. So, 24 hours from now, the Raiders are going to interview Ben Johnson. Now they're going to interview him virtually because the Detroit Lions have their bye week right now. They're the first seed in the NFC. We're going to watch Wild Card Weekend this Saturday and this Sunday, which is not today. And the Raiders are going to have a chance to talk to this guy while he has a little bit of a break before he's preparing for a playoff matchup with the Detroit Lions. So, seems like the Raiders, the day before they're set to interview Ben Johnson, have decided, you know what? Before we interview Ben Johnson, we're gonna make a big sell to this guy. We're gonna go ahead and we're gonna fire our general manager. So when the second we interview him during his bye week before this playoff matchup, we're gonna make a big sell to this guy and say, hey, you can choose your GM, bro. You can do whatever you want. Besides, Brady's gonna have an influence if you're cool with that. So that seems like the sell the Raiders are making right before they interview Ben Johnson tomorrow. Now, the Patriots are going to interview him as well, and the Bears and the Jags are going to interview him on Saturday during these wild card matchups that are going to be happening on Saturday. So, I mean, that's huge. The Raiders, it seemed like originally we're going to not be able to attract a big head coaching candidate because they had the general manager, Tom Telesco, because of the quarterback situation. And now the Raiders are saying, you know what? This is our shot. This is our one shot to throw our hat in the ring among these 6 teams looking for a head coach. We're going to go all in. We're going to go ahead and say, you know what? Let's have a clean slate here. Now, who else are the Raiders interviewing? We know they're interviewing Ben Johnson. We know they're interviewing Aaron Glenn, the coordinators of the Detroit Lions. They are also interviewing. This is a big one to me. This is something that I feel like could be a huge steal. And I've always been perplexed that Steve Spagnuolo, the defensive coordinator of the Kansas City Chiefs, who's been very successful there, and I think doesn't get enough credit from casual NFL fans. That defense has especially this year, more than any year, really saved this Kansas City Chiefs football team. And the Raiders have requested to speak with the defensive coordinator, Steve Spagnuolo. Now, the Jets and the Giants, or the Jets, are planning on interviewing Steve Spagnuolo as well. He was a former Giants defensive coordinator, interim head coach. And oddly enough, Steve Spagnuolo coached Antonio Pierce while he was with the New York Giants. You know, when they had those pregame little talks that they have, the pregame interviews before the Black Friday matchup between the Chiefs and the Raiders, they talked about that a lot, right? The influence that Steve Spagnuolo has had over Antonio Pierce. So wouldn't that be ironic if Antonio Pierce gets fired and then his former head coach takes the job? I mean, it sounds cold-blooded, but that's how this industry works, right? But the Raiders are interviewing Steve Spagnuolo as well. So you got those are 3 candidates already that they are for sure interviewing. And a big one that we haven't talked too much about, let me make sure I got it loaded up here. Robert Saleh. The Raiders are also interviewing Robert Saleh. Now, they're going to talk to Ben Johnson this week, and I believe Aaron Glenn this week. Then next week, while the divisional playoff matchups are happening, they're going to be talking to Robert Saleh. And because Robert Saleh is not employed by a team, they can meet in any capacity. There's no restrictions. There's no rules. I wouldn't be surprised. We don't know for sure yet. I would not be surprised if the Robert Saleh interview is in person. And the media got it wrong when they tried to paint the picture that Aaron Rodgers wanted Robert Saleh fired. Check out my documentary I did about the Jets situation. I tried to make a longer 30-minute thing on that. And I believe it's called How Backstabbing Ruined the New York Jets. And let me just tell you, dude, like, if Robert Saleh gets this opportunity to coach the Raiders, don't write off Aaron Rodgers if he's going to have 1 year running it with Robert Saleh, Tom Brady, and the Raiders. Don't write that off. Now, I'm not saying that that's likely going to happen, but if they hire Robert Saleh, I would not be surprised, because Aaron Rodgers seems like he really liked Robert Saleh, did not want him to necessarily get fired. And a lot of players on that Jets team felt the same way. And it was a move by the owner, Woody Johnson of the New York Jets. So don't be surprised. That could be very interesting. I know that the Raiders had a falling out with Devontae Adams there. But, I mean, if we want to talk about interesting, crazy storylines that are definitely in the realm of possibility, and the Raiders are literally going to interview this dude, Robert Saleh, and talk to him, I just wouldn't be surprised. Nothing surprises me anymore. We know that Aaron Rodgers was interested in playing with the Raiders when Josh McDaniels was still the head coach in 2023, but the Raiders did not throw their hat in the ring to trade for Aaron Rodgers after they moved on from Derek Carr. And it was something that Rodgers joked about on the Pat McAfee show that he'd be interested in.
Do you think we're going the Patriot way with Brady in charge? A little suspense is fine, but this is too much.
Shout out to the homie Alex Perez. And that is where, you know what you just said led me perfectly into the next thing that I'm going to talk about, which could potentially, and I'm not saying for sure, could potentially end up being the biggest story in the entire NFL this offseason. So this is just a fact. Like, this did happen. We just have to figure out how significant it is. So what did happen is multiple teams, not just the Raiders, reached out to Bill Belichick, despite the fact that Bill Belichick accepted the job at the University of North Carolina. Belichick has an out, a buyout. Basically, any team, any NFL team could hire Bill Belichick, and it would just cost them $10 million. That's nothing. That is chump change for Mark Davis. Mark Davis probably spends that on, I mean, I don't want to go into details, but I'm sure his Chang's budget is less than 10 million over the past 2 years. But the Raiders, and this is for sure the Raiders, this is the only team that the NFL Network insider Tom Telesco mentioned specifically, but we know multiple teams did this, reached out to Bill Belichick, and Tom Brady spoke to Bill Belichick about if he would consider maybe, we don't know the details of the conversation. There's no way. Many people believe it's about coaching again. Some people have suggested that Brady was just picking his brain as to a coach that he could possibly pursue. And that's what Diana Rossini is saying, that Belichick has no plans to return to the NFL. And he's focused on North Carolina. Okay, guys, you guys know I keep it super real, and it doesn't matter how what you know, if I'm cool with somebody, if I've cheered for somebody in the past. It's just about when somebody is bullshitting. Is there bullshit? And I like, if I had to just go with my gut here, Belichick saying he has no plans to return to the NFL, that is the biggest load of bullshit ever, and it just does not make sense with literally his falling out with the Patriots. Literally the fact that he was trying to interview for the Atlanta Falcons job, interviewed for it twice, and then lost it to Raheem Morris, and then got embarrassed last year. Bill Belichick got embarrassed last year when no other team hit him up. And a lot of people think that Robert Kraft badmouthed Bill Belichick. He definitely did to Arthur Blank and talked coaches out of pursuing Bill Belichick. The big reason why I believe, and many people believe, Bill Belichick didn't throw his hat in the coaching ring for the NFL immediately is he didn't want to get embarrassed again. He did not want to get embarrassed again in this coaching cycle. So what did he do? He did this is what I believe. And look, I don't have a leaked convo proving this happened, right? But just using logic, using context clues. This guy wants to coach in the NFL. This guy wants to catch Don Shula's winning record and become the most winningest coach in the history of NFL. He only needs about 2 decent seasons to do it. I think he needs like 14 wins. So even if he goes 7-9, 2 years, he gets it. So this guy wants to coach in the NFL, and he did a smart Bill Belichick move this time around. I believe this is a calculated move. Belichick joining the University of North Carolina, brilliant move, because it makes it seem like he has no desire for the NFL when we all know this dude does. And it makes him somebody that you got to fight for, that you got to pay, that you have to give full control to. Maybe fire your general manager to have him be a part of your operation there. It gives him more power. It gives him more leverage in negotiations. If Bill Belichick could say, I have no plans to return to the NFL and I'm happy with the University of North Carolina. But come on, dude, that's complete bullshit. Belichick does not want to be a college coach. Let's just be real. These guys have big egos, big time pride, and college is not the NFL, man. This guy does not belong in the minor leagues. He does not believe he belongs in the minor leagues, the feeder league of the NFL, basically. So I fully believe that we are going to hear not just, and this is why Mike Florio brought this up, firing Tom Telesco, the general manager of the Raiders, makes it easier to pay Bill Belichick, because I fully believe that there is going to be a candidate that nobody is talking about right now for the Las Vegas Raiders and for other teams right now. Because think about this. When the Raiders hired Josh McDaniels, every year with this coaching cycle, you always have these interviews announced, and we all take these interviews seriously. People start doing the jersey swap, Ben Johnson in Raiders gear, right? You start seeing all that happen. And what always happens in my experience doing this YouTube shit for 3 years is some guy out of nowhere who they did an interview with at the last second becomes the head coach. It is very rarely the most obvious guy who becomes the head coach of the organization. I mean, even with the Falcons Belichick example with Raheem Morris becoming the head coach, that was kind of out of nowhere. It was coming down to those two, but many people thought it was Belichick's job for the Atlanta Falcons. Now, shout out to everybody in here. Let's get the likes up. Let's turn to some more information. We've got some more updates happening right now. What does this mean with Mark Davis and Tom Brady cleaning house right now? And we got some GM leaks happening. Charlie Campbell of Walter Football is explaining that the Jets and the Raiders declined a trade down in the first round with a playoff team that would have given them a 2025 first round pick to move into the 20s. The playoff team wanted Brock Bowers. So Tom Telesco staying and selecting Brock Bowers. Both the Jets and the Raiders need a franchise QB. Should not have turned down adding extra ammo. So this is what Charlie Campbell is basically saying here. He believes that the fact that Tom Telesco did not accept a trade down in the 2024 draft may have dinged him in, and that may have been something that kind of harmed his GM resume there. And Diana Rossini is saying, I still think the biggest win the Raiders have going for them right now is Ben Johnson agreed to interview with him thanks to Tom Brady. So that is another thing to really take seriously. The fact that the Raiders are interviewing Ben Johnson tomorrow, not today, Ben Johnson tomorrow on Friday. This guy could have rejected the interview. This guy could have said, this is a waste of time. I know I'm going to the Bears. I know I'm going to the Patriots. I'm going to go ahead and reject this interview. I don't want them to get their hopes up. Ben Johnson could have done that. He decided to accept the interview. Now, on one level, you can say he's accepting the interview to try to have leverage against the Bears and the Patriots, try to get them to pay him more money, outbid, or he's sincerely interested in joining the Raiders organization and working with Tom Brady. And now that the Raiders have gotten rid of their GM, if you're a team, or if you are a head coach that wants a team that is more of a blank canvas, that you could do whatever you want, you're not tied to Caleb Williams. You're not tied to Drake May. You're not tied to Trevor Lawrence with the Jacksonville Jaguars. If you're somebody who kind of wants to find your own quarterback, maybe you think there's a guy out there who's going to be a free agent, maybe a bridge guy, maybe the next Sam Darnold, the next Baker Mayfield. If you believe there's that guy out there that you can get a lot of mileage out of, maybe the Raiders are the better destination for you. Maybe that makes a lot more sense. Now, this is something that a lot of people have avoided, and this is something that has been on my mind since the 2023 draft. Because we talked about, we all had the top QBs in the 2023 draft, right? It was CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, obviously. And, Will Levis fell in the draft. We know that happened, but nobody talked about this other guy who fell. So Roger A, Raiders.
Please trade for Mike Tomlin from the Steelers. If they lose this weekend, it's time for Tomlin to move on. RN4L.
I mean, I like your enthusiasm, Roger A, there, but why would the Steelers get rid of Mike Tomlin even if they lose? Mike Tomlin was able to win with a combination of Russell Wilson on a one-year deal and Justin Fields, and Mike Tomlin just signed a contract extension with the Pittsburgh Steelers. There has been zero indication the Steelers are wanting to move on from Mike Tomlin. Around this time, there's a lot of... I actually think the biggest clickbaiters are people who write articles more than videos, because when you're making a video, you have to talk and break things down for, what is it? Most videos are about 10 to 15 minutes, right? And these articles, and you have to, when you make a video, you have to get somebody to continue to watch the whole way and take it seriously. And that's how you get a lot of revenue in a video. Now, for these articles, it's just clicks. You just need one click. And that's how these articles get their money. And this is what's so sick is all these people make these articles just make up complete bullshit around this time of the year to make money, to get you when you're scrolling on your phone to click, oh, is Mike Tomlin done with the Steelers? You just do one click and then you find out it's bullshit and there's absolutely no opportunity to poach Mike Tomlin. I don't think the Steelers would move on from a head coach who has literally never had a losing record with their organization. Now, what is very interesting here is quarterback Hendon Hooker, who fell to the third round of the NFL draft. And you've had people say, you've had different analysts say, and I believe it was Rodney Harrison, former Patriots guy, right? He said that he believes Hendon Hooker is one of the promising, top quarterbacks that could still be a star, and he's very shocked that Hendon Hooker basically fell to the third round and is kind of a backup right now on the Detroit Lions. They recently signed Teddy Bridgewater. And I look, if you're Ben Johnson and maybe you want a blank canvas, could you convince the Detroit? Could you give up a second round pick? I mean, the Detroit Lions use a third round pick. Could you give up a second round pick for Hendon Hooker and have Ben Johnson, Hendon Hooker with the Las Vegas Raiders? Is that something that you would maybe prefer, a guy who's been learning your offense for the past 2 seasons out there in Detroit? Would you be able to start stronger doing that, or trying to make it work with Caleb Williams, make it work with Drake May, right? So I like this. There's nothing substantial to this. It's just there's been a lot of NFL insiders as of late talking about how Hendon Hooker is a lot more talented than people give him credit for, and they've been talking about the fact that Ben Johnson, there is a possibility, and it just makes sense. You don't think that he was involved in saying, "Hey, let's take Hendon Hooker in the third round"? That's actually pretty high when you think about a draft selection for a backup quarterback. You don't think Ben Johnson was involved in that at all? You don't think Dan Campbell and the general manager of the Detroit Lions wanted to hear what their hotshot offensive coordinator had to say about drafting a quarterback? Of course they did. So there's no question that, at least originally, Ben Johnson liked what Hendon Hooker could bring to the table. So I think you got to take that seriously, and I think this could be something that really starts to heat up as this head coaching hiring cycle happens. And wherever Ben Johnson lands, if Ben Johnson does land somewhere where you do not have a quarterback, I think you have to start thinking about, could that team make a play for Hendon Hooker in even February before the start of free agency? And the Detroit Lions are going to play hardball, though, so it's not going to be cheap. I mean, you're definitely going to have to give up more than a third round pick for him, but it's definitely a possibility. Do not rule it out. Either way, huge news today, out of nowhere. And the big thing about this is what it actually means. What does it actually mean? It means that the Raiders are about to make a huge freaking move. Shout out to all the people who have supported the stream so far. We're going to start breaking this down. We got more updates coming in by the second here. By the second. I literally was, you know what? I was about to go work out, but then this happened. Okay, let me see what
Firing
this
the GM only means one of two things. NC getting a 10 mil buyout for Bill, or Gruden is coming home, baby. Wi-Fi, all the love.
Appreciate you, OG Stu. Appreciate you, OG Stu. And look, like, does John Gruden have some options? People have been talking about him more and more this coaching cycle, but I still find it odd that Gruden has not had a interview request. Now, we've heard from Peter King, who I don't agree with Peter King a lot of the times. I think he's a little woke. You know, he's kind of like a woke old guy. And I don't care if I don't really care if like I agree or disagree with somebody on every single thing. But Peter King is one of the top NFL insiders in the world, right? Like literally in the world. And he has been saying that teams are doing their homework on John Gruden. So clearly there's teams interested. Now, the big thing that's been an issue when it comes to John Gruden, according to, I believe it was Peter King, it may have been Jonathan Jones of CBS, not sure, but I was listening to some stuff the other day, and nobody wants to be the first team, it seems like, to say we're interviewing John Gruden, because then you're going to get Don Lemon, and you're going to get Stephen A. Smith, all these people like ripping into you for interviewing John Gruden. You're going to get called racist. You're going to get called sexist. You're going to get called homophobe because of funny jokes in a leaked email, right? So nobody wants to be the first team to do it. I think that's what's holding up. I think the Saints are going to be the first team to do it. If I had to guess any team that's going to just... The Saints don't give a shit about what people think. I kind of, even though I don't like a lot of their moves sometimes, I do respect them for that. So I do believe they're probably going to be the first team to do it. But once a team interviews John Gruden, I think it's going to be a snowball effect where other teams are going to be like, all right, they dealt with the blowback. It wasn't that crazy. Because most fans, the people like John Gruden, the people know that he's a good guy, and the people respect him as a head coach. It's just the Don Lemons and these people who honestly probably don't even watch football that much who make it a bigger deal. Shout out to Hydro. Should the Raiders trade for quarterback Joe Milton? Now, that is something that I did want to talk about. Let me see if I have that pulled up on my docket here. First and foremost, though, Raiders beat. Talking about some comments by James Palmer, who used to work for the NFL Network, now I believe works for Bleacher Report and Underdog. I guess he made some interesting comments that we should have paid more attention to early on when it came to the Raiders coaching situation. Let's see this. 1 second. Let me get my thing right, and then we'll talk about Joe Milton. I look. It depends on the head. Should the Raiders pursue Joe Milton? It depends on the head coach, and there's one head coach the Raiders are about to interview, which I think says a lot about this Joe Milton situation. Maybe a Jalen Milroe situation. There's one coach that the Raiders are set to interview, and let me see. I'll pull it up right now. But those types of players, and I'm even thinking somebody like a Justin Fields is definitely on the table, if so.
He was not in the decision-making. I do want to put that out there, Telesco, in the decision to let AP go. That was more of Mark Davis and his advisors and Tom Brady and the other minority owners. So I'm pushing this forward. What will they be looking for? It does have the sense that they'll be looking more, and Brady will be involved, and I'll get to that, more towards an offensive-minded head coach. A couple, Antonio Pierce was on the defensive side of the ball. Didn't call plays either side, but
I mean, I no disrespect to AP, but was he really on either side of the ball? I mean, which side? I mean, really, we have Patrick Graham.
Obviously, a history on the defensive side of the ball. It has the appearance that they'd be interested in some of these, maybe younger, if they want to acquire some patience, which they haven't during Mark Davis's tenure running this team, and look at some of these names that are on that side of the ball, whether it be Ben Johnson. I don't see that happening.
Okay, so offensive-minded coach Tom Telesco was not in on the decision to fire Antonio Pierce, which means that this guy was already on the outs and not part of these big decisions. Now, this is big to me, and I feel like based on how Raider Nation has, I mean, this is just the fans, and the fans are not always obviously the brightest people to listen to, because the fans are the ones who told the Raiders to hire Antonio Pierce, and that was a complete shit show, right? So you don't want to listen to the fans. But the fans always want, and this happens, and I think Madden has a lot to do with it, the video game Madden. And seeing people like Lamar Jackson, the fans want a mobile quarterback. They want to see what that would look like when you're in the red zone, when you have somebody like Jalen Hurts, when you have somebody like Cam Newton back when he was in his prime. You just have a higher probability in the red zone to get a touchdown when you have a quarterback who can maybe sneak in there and use his legs a little bit. Now, the Raiders have requested to interview the Ravens offensive coordinator, Todd Monken, for the head coaching position. This guy's been the offensive coordinator there for the past few years. I believe he worked with Jim Harbaugh also in Michigan, but this is huge. This is the guy running the Lamar Jackson offense, right? And if the Raiders are interviewing him, and if what Jesse Palmer just said is true, Raiders are interested in an offensive-minded head coach. Maybe you can attract Ben Johnson. If Ben Johnson does accept another job, then maybe you kick the tires and, oh, so he did not work in Michigan. No. Okay, so Todd Monken did not work in Michigan, was the offensive coordinator with the Buccaneers in 2018. I believe that was part of the Jameis Winston years. And then Cleveland Browns a little bit with Baker Mayfield, and then went to Georgia and has now been with the Ravens for the past 2 seasons, Todd Monken. Well, the Raiders are interviewing him. And if they give this guy the head coaching position, we had the earlier questioner talk about trading for Joe Milton. Well, that makes a lot of sense. If you had the guy who's been running the offense with Lamar Jackson the past 2 seasons, and you have him with Joe Milton, mobile quarterback with the New England Patriots, that's something that kind of fits, right? Or maybe you trade back in the first round and you grab a Jalen Milroe. Maybe, and this is something that happened with Anthony Richardson. This is something that happened clearly with Bo Nix and Michael Penix Jr. Remember, Bo Nix and Michael Penix Jr. this past draft, people were saying you can get them in the late first round. Maybe they'll fall to the high second. And where did those guys go? Top 15, both of them. Michael Penix was top 10. So if you're going to end up going with Todd Monken, maybe the Raiders, maybe Jalen Milroe rises in the draft and you grab that mobile quarterback out of Alabama, have this guy who's worked with Lamar Jackson the past 2 years, and you have this type of offense in Vegas, and you see how it goes. Try to keep some continuity on the defense. You've already spent some big money there. That's a possibility. I believe they cannot land any of these other big head coaches. Guys, send me your thoughts right now. We are looking at more updates by the minute. More stuff is coming out about the fallout between the Raiders and Tom Telesco, along with Antonio Pierce. A lot of people have been talking about John Gruden. We talked about that a little bit earlier. I still find it odd that oh, whoa, wait a second. Okay, this is a little interesting. Now, Mike Mayock's daughter, Leigh Mayock, who has been, she's vocal on social media, still considers herself a Raiders fan. Now that the Raiders have fired Tom Telesco, she has retweeted this. And granted, she did put a laugh emoji, so don't take it seriously. Let's run it back, guys. She's saying, let's run it back, guys. Meaning, let's run it back with John Gruden and Mike Mayock as the general manager. You guys know how I feel. Now, Mike Mayock, I think he made some mistakes, but he must have learned from that. And I definitely think it'd be an upgrade over the Antonio Pierce, Tom Telesco situation. And if you can't get Ben Johnson, that might be something that happens. But obviously, mixed reviews. But I find it odd that she was willing to go out there and say that. Now, do I think that there's anything serious here? You can see Mike Mayock pictured with her. I don't think there's anything serious, but there was something, and I saw this pop up recently because she runs a podcast with Mike Mayock, and she wrote this the other day. Any teams looking for a new GM, my dad is so bored he joins my podcast every week. So she's been trying to stump for her dad, and this could just be an empty gesture. But for those looking at the nostalgic for the John Gruden, Mike Mayock situation, and I'm not even sure if those guys are still on good terms, who knows? But anybody still interested in that? Ooh, Carson Beck, interested in entering the transfer portal. Is he not going to be part of the draft? Wow, Carson Beck was going to enter the NFL draft, and now he will enter the transfer portal. Wow. Okay. Another quarterback not going to be available in the draft. No Carson Beck available in the draft. But that would be an interesting possibility if you're thinking about the Mayock reunion. I don't think so, though. I think with Tom Brady, the Raiders are going to go in a new direction. I would be shocked. I would be stoked, but I would also be shocked that the Raiders, go for somebody that they've already had in the past. And I think a lot hinges on the meeting tomorrow, the interview with Ben Johnson. But this does, in my opinion, this shows that the Raiders are kind of a mess right now. I really don't like the fact that they're sort of all over the place. I don't like the fact that they had Antonio Pierce go out there and talk to the media just to fire him instantly. I think it seems like they've sort of been indecisive, or maybe honestly, just not too concerned with these other people's time. And I do get it. They don't owe Tom Telesco anything. They don't owe these other people on the staff anything. But when you delay these decisions, it makes it tough for people who work for Tom Telesco, for them to find a new job. People who worked for Antonio Pierce, for them to find a new job. So, I think that's tough. I think that's a bad look. It's not going to make you look popular among other candidates, other people around the league. But at the end of the day, this is what the Raiders are elected to do. So, shocking news. Now, more about Belichick and his potential signing with the Raiders, if that's something that's on the horizon. Now you have Florio saying, could Belichick leave UNC? He accepted that deal, and ignore the leaks from unnamed sources close to Belichick and focus on the buyout. The fact that there is a buyout in the first place. Why would there be a $10 million buyout in the first place for Bill Belichick's contract? That is a little sus, honestly. So Raiders approach Belichick until June 1st. They can make this decision. Belichick had hoped for a wink and nod commitment from an NFL team that he'd be the next head coach. Belichick wanted a team to violate the spirit of the Rooney Rule by promising him a job without doing a proper search. That's pretty big stuff now. Now, this is NBC Mike Florio. The Raiders make the most sense because Belichick reveres Al Davis. Oh, God. And Tom Brady is there, obviously, with the Raiders. Does he have a good relationship with Belichick? Apparently. And could this happen? Now, they're saying that he has no plans to leave. And that is actually a funny way. They are wording this that Belichick has no plans to leave North Carolina, meaning the plans can change. Isn't that what that means? Well, Belichick has no plans to leave North Carolina. Okay. Why not just say Belichick is not leaving North Carolina? Belichick will not accept an NFL job. Why not just say that? Instead, you're saying he has no plans. No plans. Meaning that shit could change real quick if Tom Brady and Mark Davis offer him the bag to play and coach the Raiders. So this is something to look out. I mean, this is not something that I'm interested in. I would prefer the Raiders go with somebody at least in their 60s rather than in their 70s. But this could be something that the Raiders do with Tom Brady's first move as a head coach, or for a head coach. Definitely possible. So we got to keep our eyes peeled and be on the lookout for that. Now, I want to know. Let me know in the chat, and I want to know from you guys. Do you agree with the firing of Tommy Telesco? Let me know in the chat right here, right now. It has officially happened. Do you agree with the firing of Tom Telesco? The Raiders have relieved Tom Telesco of his duties as general manager. We appreciate his efforts in helping build a foundation for the future, and we wish Tom and his family the best. The cordial Raiders saying what they got to say to this guy. But do you guys agree with the move? Yes or no? I want to know what you guys think. I'm sure there's going to be some people who say, hey, maybe he had a decent draft. Probably not. A lot of people kind of want to clean house, kind of want to see what else could happen here. And I don't know if it's just my chat, but a lot of people, it's probably just because it's my chat and on my channel, a lot of people want this mother effer to come back. Now, I don't think Brady's not going to let this happen, but a lot of people want this mother effer to come back based on just my chat. I mean, it seems like just the chat here is the one saying this. Now, let's see if we have any more interviews for the Raiders here. We do have the NFL Network giving their official statement on it. Let's take a look. Let's take a look here on this, see what they had to say.
Today, they've decided to let go of general manager Tom Telesco. For that, we welcome in our NFL Network insider, Ian Rappaport. Strange, Telesco.
And that is...
what more can you tell us, and why is the timing of this also strange?
Fun fact, though, Taylor Biscotti is she's a little bit of a cougar hunter with Mr. Playoff Man, Mr. Oregon, Justin Herbert. Yes, Justin Herbert dating Taylor Biscotti, who I believe is older than him by about 7 years. So Justin Herbert, a little bit of a cougar hunter here with Taylor Biscotti. But shout out to John Raider Snake. What this firing tells me is the incoming coach wants his GM. Who would want that? Belichick or Gruden? Gruden or Belichick? But I do think Gruden has less leverage because of the lawsuit. So I think he may be in a situation where a team says, yo, dude, like you got all this baggage. Like, we want a GM to keep you in check, to have some guardrails here. That could happen to John Gruden. Now, at the same time, and what it seems like based on this reporting from the Raiders, from NFL Network and all these people, it seems like it's preferable to have the GM and the coach on the same page. It just seems like it causes too much friction from their point of view. So even if they were given the keys to somebody like a Belichick and a Gruden, it seems like they think they would just have more success if they had a GM that was on the same page rather than some guy trying to provide some guardrails and protect him here. So we'll see what happens.
No, we'll get to the timing part first. The Raiders are the Raiders, and owner Mark Davis does things on his own timeline. From my understanding, he had to do some meetings on Monday to really finalize and crystallize his decision.
Oh, man. So Mark Davis is a late arriver at the facility. So all I picture is Mark Davis is the dude who's late for work when it comes to the Raiders. He shows up on his own time. He's got a shitload of money, and this bro shows up late to the facility, and that's why it takes time for decisions to be made. So I just picture Mark in the bowl cut, rolling out of bed, and he's the last one in the building. Oh, good old Mark Davis. Hey, he finishes last. There you go. He finishes last.
About midday on Tuesday, fired Antonio Pierce, went through a bunch of other meetings to decide the fate of general manager Tom Telesco, and today informed him that he also was out after just 1 year. And the mechanics of this are interesting because the Raiders are also, of course, conducting a head coaching search. They've put in several requests to interview head coach candidates.
And that's crazy, man, that he was there for so long. I mean, the guy was the general manager for the Chargers there and the Spanos family for over 10 years. That is so long. That is just such a long time. And it's going to be shocking to see whether or not he gets hired again. I mean, I think somebody's going to hire him within the division just because he has great intel on the Chargers and the Raiders. If I was the Broncos or the Chiefs, I would at least hire Tom Telesco as an assistant to get some intel on. He's been in the front office of both of these buildings. I mean, that's valuable information.
From my understanding, Tom Telesco was not involved in that at all. Instead, it was a search firm run by Jed Hughes named Korn Ferry that was actually involved in the search for the head coach. So while Tom Telesco was still the GM as of...
Not involved in the head coach search. Now, you can see here on this ticker, the Raiders are going to interview Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn, Robert Saleh, Todd Monken, and Steve Spagnuolo. So you got 5 candidates there already. But I predict we will have by the 20th is when the head coach will be hired. I don't think anybody will be hired much later than that. So I would say the week of the 20th is when it happens, before the Super Bowl, but not after. That's what I predict. By the way, guys, get these likes up. We have been streaming live for 47 minutes so far, giving you breaking live coverage of this news happening right now. We're at 269 likes. We have 1,400 people here. Get those likes up to help support this live stream and help keep this channel going. It's a good way, free way to support the show. Yeah, cheap. I mean, it's a free way to support the show. Give this mother effer a damn like. And shout out to the chat too. The chat is moving about this head coaching situation and this now general manager situation.
Going to be very much involved. He has been meeting with owner Mark Davis, among other people in his inner circle. Among the things they decided, Antonio Pierce and Telesco are out. A full house cleaning in Las Vegas.
Full house cleaning in Las Vegas. We knew that. We got that. By the way, we are now at 300 likes. We should be at literally 600 likes. Hit the like button, guys, to keep this going. Shout out to Justice. I think this telegraphs the Raiders want to trade up. Tom Telesco had a reputation not to trade up. Look, I think if they wanted him to trade up, he would acquiesce and he would trade up. Carlos Rodriguez
just tipped $9.99 through Super Chat. Wi-Fi 2 days in a row. LFG. I agree with the firing. Why did we hire a guy we got fired from the Chargers?
Exactly. That's a good thing to bring up right now.
And not rebuild. What do you say?
Yeah. So in the latest video, I finally shared from Maxx Crosby. So shout out to Carlos Rodriguez. Shout out to Justice Dinut, not Donut. Oh, dude, I'm craving a donut right now. Shout out to you as well. But Carlos, I mean, look, if the Raiders keep dropping banging news, we'll go live every freaking day, dude. We'll go live every freaking day if the Raiders keep dropping some crazy ass news. But shout out to you, Carlos. And I do think that this really does matter in terms of this decision. What's going to happen with Maxx Crosby? Okay, so that happened yesterday. What's going to happen with Maxx Crosby? Because I shared that in my video yesterday. Some of you guys may have seen that. I'm not going to play the whole thing or anything like that. But Crosby basically, I feel like he's putting pressure on the Raiders, man. I mean, he seems frustrated, and he's basically saying I need to know that we're going to be a competitive team this year, and it seems very difficult to make that happen. So, like I have no guaranteed money. Right when you say I have no guaranteed money, that really worries me, and that tells me you better make the right call. Now, is Ben Johnson going to be enough to make Maxx Crosby not request a trade? Because look, if you could force somebody to stay on your team, if they don't want to be there, that shit just rarely works. I mean, shit hits the fan eventually, especially mid-season. I could see if the Raiders don't get the right coach, they start losing, and they're at a losing record in the middle of the season. We can have another Devontae Adams situation if we don't take into account and make a really good decision at head coach and don't take into account what Maxx Crosby thinks. Now, I think there are some candidates that he would like, obviously the top dogs, but we know Gruden's lurking in the background as well. Now, would Belichick be enough to keep Maxx Crosby? We're talking about the Patriots way. We had a chat earlier mentioning that. Do these players really want the Patriot way after dealing with Josh McDaniels? Belichick's basically going to be the core of Josh McDaniels. Where Josh McDaniels spawns from. So I find that I don't know how that will jive with people like Maxx Crosby. Now, a lot of players on the Raiders team, there's so much turnover where I don't feel like there's enough talented players to lose the locker room. I think the only locker room you can lose with the coaching decision for the Raiders is Maxx Crosby, because there's nobody else besides, I mean, Brock Bowers is on a rookie contract, so he's not going to be demanding. He's a young guy. But when you look at the Raiders team, the only people who seem like the vocal leaders who may have an opinion that they're going to tell the organization are on that standing is Maxx Crosby. There's nobody else that I could see on the Raiders team being like, oh, you lost the locker room, you didn't hire the right guy. Like nobody else has that standing on the Raiders team besides Maxx Crosby.
You know what I mean? My contract situation, I have no more guaranteed money. There's a lot of different things. Obviously, there's gonna be a lot of things that need to be talked about, and I'm looking forward to those conversations. So, yeah, it's gonna be awesome. I'm really looking forward to this offseason and the process, and
hopefully the Raiders. So yeah, he's looking forward to the offseason. Usually, you hate the offseason because it reminds you're not at the playoffs, right? You want to freaking play again to prove it on the grass that you're a good freaking team. But Maxx Crosby's looking forward to the offseason. I mean, I literally bought a Maxx Crosby jersey because I like to pick offensive players, and I finally bought a Maxx Crosby jersey before the start of the season. And yeah, I really don't want that to expire. But if we're going to be real, it's not looking good.
With Tom Brady involved.
But appreciate you, Carlos. And I do think that it was the right move to move on from Tom Telesco. And I do think that if the Raiders get like a Liam Cohen or a Aaron Glenn, something not that inspiring, I could see Crosby seeking a trade. If the Raiders don't address the quarterback situation, which how is Crosby going to know that they address the quarterback situation until free agency, unless they trade up in the draft? If they don't get that established around free agency, that's when I see him requesting a trade.
Then Tom Pelissero reported on Tuesday that they have reached out to Bill Belichick. Do you think that letting go of Telesco has something to do with potentially bringing Bill Belichick in? Because we know that he likes to serve as the general manager as well.
So look, the Raiders reaching out to Bill Belichick is some real shit. So it is now seeming likely. Like if I had to narrow down two of the most likely candidates right now based off this, I would say Ben Johnson, Bill Belichick. That's what the media is saying. They're trying to paint this picture now. Are they going to pull a fast one? We know the betting market, and this is the only channel you're going to hear talking about this shit. Honestly, the betting market, insider trading, that has a big. There is insider trading with betting, and on sports that has to happen. I mean, we saw a little case happen with the trainer of a famous baseball player just this past year that showed that even these parlays, there could be some insider trading on these parlays. So watch out. But this happens with who people select in the draft. This happens with who they're going to hire as head coach. Is this just a smokescreen saying it's Belichick, saying it's Ben Johnson? Because that's the message that's being put out there. Belichick, Ben Johnson. That's what's being put out there right now.
We'll see about as it relates to Bill Belichick. As far as I can tell, he has remained committed to North Carolina. Not that those phone calls didn't exist. They did. But it does seem to be committed to North Carolina. What it does seem like this means, though.
Don't put this, dude. He's committed to North Carolina. Do you believe, like, tell me in the chat, do you believe Bill Belichick would rather coach at North Carolina than any NFL team? The dude would rather coach the Panthers. The dude would rather coach the Browns. I mean, it's just, come on.
Whatever head coach they're going to bring in, that at least it is going to be a head coach who has some familiarity with the GM, or at least the opportunity to start new. And of course, Tom Brady has a very close relationship with Mike Vrabel, who is interviewing right now as we speak with the New England Patriots.
Here's the thing. The Raiders do not have an interview set up with Mike Vrabel. That's what's happening right now. The Raiders have no interview set up with Mike Vrabel. Is he going to come out of nowhere and interview and take the Raiders' job? I don't know. But the Raiders have not even scheduled an interview with Mike Vrabel. That concerns me. That makes me think maybe he's not in on the table. Maybe he's zeroed in on the New England Patriots.
Many people believe, me included, that Vrabel is a top candidate, if not the top candidate, for the New England Patriots.
Right,
but the
exactly.
fact that the Raiders now have an opening at head coach, an opening at general manager, does at least open the door that it would be something Vrabel would potentially consider. Now, the Patriots have a jump start on that. Again, he is literally
Cody Jordan,
in the
$2.
room with them
Belichick
right
is the
now.
HC I'm
so
sitting
that
the
would
nightmare
theoretically give them the leg up. But we will see if...
I think the Patriots are going to offer Vrabel a deal that he can't refuse. Shout out to Cody. Belichick is the head coach. I'm sitting that nightmare out. Like it's not going to work. Like if he's if he's the head coach, it fizzled out in New England. The Raiders have to build. They need to build. There does need to be somewhat of a rebuild here. I mean, let's just be real. We don't have a star running back like a lot of teams do. We have now discovered this year how important the running back position is. And then guess what? All those prices for running backs, they're going up this year. They were down last year. They're going up because we've seen Saquon, we've seen Josh Jacobs, we've seen these guys get disrespected by their former teams, and now they're completely balling out and worth every penny, if not more than that. So we need a running back. We need a quarterback. None of our quarterbacks can compete for the playoffs. I'm sorry. Aiden O'Connell's great, but he's a backup quarterback. You need a playmaker at QB. You need a guy. If you don't have a mobile guy, he's got to be perfect. He's got to be like zoom, 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 hitting like, on all cylinders like Jared Goff, right? How he's doing right now with the Detroit Lions. We need pieces on the offensive line. Center, I think, is becoming a question. I think tackle is becoming a question as well. Guard, it's been shaky there at least one position at guard. And I also think that edge is not, like, unless you think Tyree Wilson's going to come up, unless you think Malcolm Kuntz is going to bounce back from injury, you still got a question mark on edge. Is Maxx Crosby happy? You may have two question marks on it at edge. And then we also have to bring back some linebackers and look at our secondary, because when it comes to our secondary, I think we only have one or two guys who I anticipate starting next year who are currently on the roster, that being Merrick and Ja'Cory Bennett. I think there's going to be a decision to make on Nate Hobbs, decision to make on Jack Jones, decision to make on Marcus Epps. A lot of decisions for the Raiders. So going into what Cody's comment there, like, is Belichick going to be able to turn this around in 1 year and make a playoff run? I mean, come on, man. I think it's going to take some time. Unless he has some guys in mind in free agency, a lot of people aren't going to touch. I think it's going to take some time.
The Raiders figure into his thinking in the future.
Lots to keep an eye on in Las Vegas. Ian Rappaport, thank you so much.
And she's got herself a young Justin Herbert. Shout out to Taylor Bisciotti. Copping a young Justin Herbert, man. I mean, that's some talent. That's some talented stuff. You got to give her some credit. Speaking of some other news happening around the NFL, Derek Carr looks to be going back to the Saints, but he made an interesting comment here, and I'm almost wondering. Carr has 2 years left on his deal with the Saints. He's talked about the fact that he's got good word from him that they are bringing him back. They're asking him what type of coaches he wants, so he feels like they're going to bring him back. Now, he lived in Vegas part-time while living in New Orleans. He lived in New Orleans during the season. I think he may have bought a house out there, but he's doing this new thing where he's going to be moving to Fresno, California, my hometown, where we watched Derek Carr and his brother, David Carr, play at Fresno State. And now you got this guy, apparently, and where the hell did my mouse go? You got this guy apparently moving to Fresno. Now, this would otherwise not be a big deal, not big news, right? Who cares? This dude's moving to Fresno. Does that really matter? I think this could maybe signal that maybe Derek Carr, like, look, this past season with the Saints, he said it was the most injured he's ever been in his career. And he look, we're Raiders fans. We know this dude. We're Raiders fans. We know this dude. This dude's only missed like what? 3 starts in the 10 years he was with the Raiders? Due to injury, he missed 2 because Josh McDaniels benched him. But due to injury, he missed the playoffs, 1 game in 2017, and 1 game before the playoffs. And he's been knocked out of a few games, left the Dolphins game in 2020 with a groin injury, a couple things like that. But he's only missed like 3 games, 3 starts as the Raiders quarterback. And with the Saints, what was his record this year? I think he missed like 7 starts. He missed 7 starts this year with the Saints. So he's admitted this is the most injured he's ever been in his career, missed the most games. And now he's moving to Fresno, California. Could Derek Carr be hanging it up, man? That's a serious question that we have to think about.
Moving into our place in Fresno, excited about that for my kids to finally have a place they can call home, because instead of we've moved a lot, and they've been asking me where are we going to grow up forever, and so we always told them Fresno, and now we get to do that, and so they're excited about that, and so I'm excited about those things in the off season. Football takes a little bit of a back seat, when it's family time.
Football takes a little bit of a backseat when it's family time. And you know what? I always go back to, you always have to think of what ifs. And there's tons of what ifs, right? What if the Raiders kept Rich Bisaccia, after John Gruden was forced out? What if John Gruden was never forced out? What if Josh McDaniels ran it back just 1 more year with Derek Carr? Clearly, even in Josh McDaniels' toxic locker room situation, clearly with Carr, it was better under Josh McDaniels 2022 than when Jimmy G in 2023. And what if Derek Carr, when he left the Raiders, what if he would have gone to the Jets? I mean, he openly admitted on the Part of My Take podcast that they had that offer there. He wanted to weigh his options. Now, I'm assuming the Jets offered him less money than the Saints. That's what I'm assuming. Granted, he tries to say that, he had to explore more and, it wasn't the right fit. I would just assume, because this, unfortunately, a lot of this ends up being about money, right? You wish it could be about something more than that. But if I had to guess, and I don't know. But what if he would have taken that job with the Jets in 2023 instead of the Saints? What if the Jets would have grabbed Carr instead of Aaron Rodgers? A lot of what ifs, man. And I think things could have turned out very differently. But now Carr making the Central Valley Fresno his permanent home. And no, Wi-Fi Willie is not running back to move back to Fresno to follow in the footsteps. No, that's not happening. But that's big news. And some people have joked around and talked about the possibility of Carr going to a new team. Could he go back to the Raiders if the Raiders don't find a solution at QB? It's looking like it's headed towards maybe a year or 2 left with the Saints, and then Fresno. I mean, that's big. Now, granted, he could just be moving there, and then he's going to explore other teams in the regular season, or go move to wherever team he's playing for, like the Saints in the regular season. But that's some pretty big stuff, man. That's some pretty big stuff. Shout out to everybody hanging out right now. We got a decent amount of people. We only got, we only got 381 likes, man. If we don't get to 700 likes in the next minute, I think we're gonna end the stream. If we don't get to 700 likes in the next minute, let's do a timer. Let's do a stopwatch. If we don't get to it in the next minute, 700 likes, I believe we will end the stream. So got the stopwatch. This is kind of a neat thing here. So shout out to those people who have liked and supported the stream so far. We have been live for an hour, breaking this news. Raiders have the 2nd most cap space in the NFL, and now they have cleaned house. no general manager, no head coach right now, and big changes happening in Las Vegas. Only 3 teams in the NFL have general manager openings, the Raiders being one of them right now. That could be very attractive for a lot of people. We're at 40 seconds. 40 seconds. We are at 456 likes so far. We need to get to 700. 465. We need to get to 700 likes in about, we got 10 more seconds. I'll give it 20 more seconds. I'll give it 20 more seconds. We're at 470. Some people have floated around Pete Carroll. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that guy is way too old. But shout out to Tom Telesco, Antonio Pierce. Shout out to all the Raiders fans who said we're going to the Super Bowl with those two. We're going to be a sleeper team with AP because he's got swagger. Shout out to those fans. And 475 likes. Peace out, guys. We didn't get there in time, and I hope you have a good one.